Everybody, good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you're joining us in the world. Thank you very much for joining this, our sixth and final webinar of this current series. Please note just straight away that this webinar is going to be recorded, and we also have AI translated captions if you would like a different language. Okay, without further ado, a bit about Nature Positive Universities. NPU started in 2021 as a collaboration between researchers at the University of Oxford and UNEP to try and form a race to net zero style movement, but for the higher education sector's biodiversity impact, supported by the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. We all know that higher education has a massive global biodiversity footprint that needs to be dealt with. Universities also have a unique power and influence in their communities and beyond, so can play a key role in tackling the climate and biodiversity crises. We have a 4-step pledge that commits our members to calculate their baseline impacts, set measurable targets, undertake specific actions using our refrain, reduce, restore, and renew framework, and finally, publicly report progress. We also have a student ambassadors program to encourage students to get involved by helping us seize the urgency and push their institutions to be more ambitious, and getting involved practically with biodiversity surveys, creating new habitats, and sharing their experiences with a global network of students on campuses across the world. Today's webinar is our 6th in the series, and it's time to hand over to you. We have a fantastic lineup of panelists to answer your questions about NPU and Nature Positive more widely in this Q&A forum. Your host today, my name is Henry Grubb. I'm a PhD student at Imperial College London, and our other hosts are Emily Stott, who is the Nature Positive University's coordinator. Hello, Emily.
Hello.
And Holly Thompson, who's our Nature Positive University assistant. Hello, Holly.
Hi there. Thank you very much.
If you're part of a university that's already a pledged member, then we really hope this webinar provides inspiration for how to move your nature positive journey forward. But we also want more universities to take the pledge and sign up. So please take a look at our website afterwards so you know how to make a pledge, and everyone can get in touch with Holly and Emily to ask questions and follow up about the pledge or the student ambassador program. We'll put some links in at the end. Our agenda for today, we have a great lineup of panelists, and very shortly I'm going to hand over to our forum chair, Sam Barrett, who's the Chief of Youth Education and Advocacy at the United Nations Environment Programme. In the first half of the Q&A, we're going to be running through some of the questions that have already been pre-submitted. If you'd like to contribute a comment to the discussion, then please use the raise hand function and Sam can pick you out. If you'd like to ask a brand new question, then please pop that in the chat, and then we'll have time in the second half of the webinar to go through those questions towards the end. So that's enough from me. I'm now going to hand over to Sam Barrett, who can introduce our panelists. Over to you, Sam.
Thanks, Henry, and good afternoon, good evening, good morning, or wherever you are. Thank you for joining this call. I think the aim of this is to get super practical, to think about what can you do to get started and to make a difference. And I think we've got a great panel of people here who can speak to what does it mean to be nature positive? How can we make the greatest difference, and where to begin? So without further ado, I'm just going to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves and to say who they are, where they're from, and why nature positive is important to them. So I'm going to start, if it's okay, with Emily Stott, who is the Nature Positive University's coordinator from Oxford. So Emily, over to you.
Hi, everyone. It's great to see you here. I recognise many of the names and faces that I see. So I'm Emily. I'm based at Department of Biology at University of Oxford, and I coordinate this Nature Positive University's initiative. And I guess a confession, the first time I heard the words nature positive were when I applied for this job. And I found it a really inspiring framework and a way to bring together nature and climate and really just inject nature into all the things that we do and find ways to embed nature into our decision making and the roles of people at universities and sort of build, I guess, awareness about the term nature positive and what it means. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Emily. And now I'm going to turn to Favour Aragbi, who's our Student Ambassador Coordinator from the University of Benin. in Nigeria. So Favour, same questions over to you. Let's hear from
Thank
you.
you very much. Hello, everyone. My name is Favour Eragbe. I'm a student at the University of Benin in Nigeria, and I'm student ambassador coordinator. For me, my interest joining Nature Positive University's initiative was the highlights and the link they were bringing together universities and staff to advocate towards a common goal, which is actually very, very crucial towards advocating for a net zero future. That was my inspiration, and that's why I joined the network. Thank you. Thank you.
Right, brilliant. Really good to have you with us, Favour. Next, I'm going to ask Dr. Rosalind Shaw to join us, who's from the University of Exeter, and she's the sustainability manager. And I've just been hearing a lot of good things about what Ros is up to. So, Rosalind, the floor is yours.
Oh, hi everyone. Thanks for that introduction. Yeah, so I'm sustainability manager for biodiversity. So I sit in the professional services side of the University of Exeter, which is based in Devon and Cornwall in the UK. So it's really, I sit in the side of the university that is the nuts and bolts of keeping the wheels on. Nature positive is important to me personally, I guess, because I feel sort of strongly that we are a part of nature, and therefore, you know, being part of nature, we really need to be able to live in harmony with the rest of the natural world and keep it at the heart of everything that we do. And I suppose on an institutional level, we have a load of really great researchers who work on nature, ecology, social science aspects of the environment, and it's really important that we sort of stand by our values as an institution.
Right. Thanks, Rosalind. And you're also from a beautiful part of the world as well, with lots of nature to be invested in. And last but by no means least, so Professor E.J. Milner-Galland, who's the Tasso Leventis Professor of Biodiversity from the University of Oxford, and many, many other things that I don't think we've got time to introduce. But E.J., welcome to this, and just share with us your thoughts on what do you do and why Nature Positive is so important to you.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be talking to everybody today. I'm looking forward to hearing everybody's insights. So I, as a professor of biodiversity, research nature positive and biodiversity, and a team of us decided that it would actually be really good if, instead of just researching how to change systems from, you know, impacting nature into being nature positive, we could actually try to get our universities to make a difference internally and actually practice what we preach, you know, as a university. I thought this was going to be a really difficult ask. And actually, I was remarkably surprised and happy to find that the door was wide open. There were people in my university, in the administration, right up to the very senior level, who were really keen to work on this, but didn't really know how to go about it. And then we were put in touch with Sam and his team, and the whole thing kind of took off as something that would be a really great international collaboration. I think it's really important that we do this together, because as universities, we are one of the most trusted institutions. You know, people trust us more than they trust politicians, more than they trust journalists. They trust scientists and their universities to help them to speak the truth. And so we can be powerful agents for change in communities through our research, through our education, and through our policy influence. And that means that if we do band together, if we show the way as our sector and provide that leadership as a whole sector, then hopefully other sectors will come along with us. And that's why I think Nature Positive Universities is so powerful.
Brilliant. Thanks, CJ. Thanks, Favour. Thanks, Rosalind, and thanks, Emily. So we've got a series of questions. I'm just going to say a small thing. So I think why I'm so interested in nature positive universities is for two reasons. One is that universities sit at the heart of cities. What happens in a university will affect many, many other people. And your leadership, I think, can be contagious. And often universities can feel slightly constrained. Like the people within the community have reverence for them. But they don't really know exactly what they do. But I think universities can be really massive, powerful agents for change, particularly when it comes to investing in nature within a city. They'll have spillover effects across a much wider ecosystem. And the second thing for universities is, I think with somewhere in the region of 200 million people coming through a university every single year, your ability to work with the next generation of people going into the workplace to see nature as having value, seeing nature as something to invest in, but seeing nature as something you cannot take for granted is critical. So I think what you can do in a cityscape and what you can do in a mindset of young people is really powerful, which is why at UNEP, we're really keen to see how nature positive universities can become a movement, both of students and professors, administrators, and within cities to see what's possible. So this call, I think, is for those with us today or those watching the recording, is a chance to really listen to what people have already done. And so if you're not sure, this is a chance for you to figure out what you can do to get going. And don't worry about getting it wrong, just get it started. And this is also a chance for you to feel part of a community where you can swap notes and kind of ask people quietly, well, what did you do? How did you do it? So hopefully there's lots of tips and tricks we're going to hear in these questions. So without further ado, I've got a few questions I'm going to start with. And Henry, if you don't mind me, I'm just going to throw these open to the floor and maybe take 2 responses just so we can whiz through the time. I see you nodding. But I'm going to start with Louis Law, I should say, who I don't know if it's on the call, but Louis, are you with us?
I'm not sure Louis can make it at the moment, Sam, but
Okay.
if we give the question on their behalf.
Great, super. So Louis sent his question just in case he wouldn't be there, and I think it is quite late in the day, but what he asks is, what does it mean to be a nature positive university? What do you have to commit to? And what kind of support and resources can nature positive universities provide? So I might ask Emily to start with that, if that's okay. And then others can build off the back of that. So Emily, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a really good introductory question to what we're all about. So firstly, anybody is welcome to join us as an individual. We welcome people from all over universities, students, staff, academics, any role that you have at a university is relevant. Secondly, the other sort of major way that we have to get involved is by institutions making a pledge, which Henry outlined at the beginning. It's really a way to show your commitment at an institutional level. And so the pledge has 4 steps. It has setting a baseline for biodiversity. What are your impacts on nature, or what nature do you have on your campus? Setting targets so that you can measurably improve what you have. Taking action to meet your targets and reporting each year. So that's what it means to make a pledge. And it's intentionally flexible in scope. We recognise that universities have really different levels of capacity and capability in this area in terms of staff or resources that they have. But we think this framework is a good way to work towards sort of biodiversity outcomes. In terms of what we can offer you, this webinar series is one of the things that we offer. We will be restarting these again in the next academic year with all kinds of topics to illustrate what's happening in the network. In addition to that, we will be producing guidance documents. We will be setting up regional hubs to provide more support in your local area and language. We also offer one-to-one calls to chat through what you're doing at your institution and what more sort of support you could need. So yeah, I think that's probably a good summary of what it means to get involved. The other part of our program is our student ambassador program. So any student from any institution around the world can connect directly with us to take action by connecting with a kind of global network of their peers. Okay,
great. I might just build on that and just maybe ask Favour just to say, I mean, what difference are students making in the Nature Positive University Initiative? What difference are you making to push universities to do things they might not naturally do?
Okay, thank you very much. I think it's very important that if universities are leading initiatives towards nature positive, students cannot be left out, and students, we have so much power. I think in my own work, when I started my journey, I did not really get enough support from my university, but as time went on, I began to get staff participation and collaboration from other groups and other initiatives on university campus. So as a student, it's important you add your voice. You can actually do a lot. You can stir up a movement. You can stir up activism on your university campus. So it's very, very important. And there are a lot of opportunities for students to join the Nature Positive Initiative.
Right. And Favour, did the university administrators listen to you, or did they try and ignore you to begin with until you wouldn't go away?
Okay, yes, they listened to me. They listened to me, but I think at that time, my university were not looking at pledging. They were more concerned about how they were going to maintain and report over time, put together a team. So I think according to what I was told, they have a project at hand which they need to run. But they offered me support when it comes to planning events, locations, with staff. They offered me their support.
Okay, great. That's really good to hear. Okay, Mohammed, I might come to you a bit later. I'm going to run through a few more questions, but I note your hand up, sir, so I'm going to come back to you shortly, but I'm just going to run through one or two others. Just want to see if EJ or Roz, do you want to add anything to this question? I'm going to move to the next one. I'm going to move on. Great. Okay. So the next one is just, maybe I'm going to ask this of you, EJ, if that's okay, which is, you spent a fair bit of time at Oxford just baselining what will it take for you to be nature positive? Could you just let us know, how did you do that? Who needed to be involved? And was that harder or easier than you thought?
That's a great question. So the first thing was that it was led by our university's sustainability team. It wasn't led by academics. And actually it came because the Vice Chancellor decided that it was important. And very importantly, we had our Pro-Vice Chancellor for Planning and Resources as the leader of the baselining thing. So it was the money guy. It wasn't the environment or communities person who was leading on this and very passionate. And then it was a very inclusive exercise. So coming to what Favour was saying, we had students involved, we had administrative people involved, we had academics involved. And I think that was incredibly important, because this is something where you have to build a constituency across the whole university. We then, after having, and interestingly, actually, in terms of the actual impacts that we have, the preconceptions that we had, and especially I have to say the academics, were quite wrong when we did the baselining. So when people came in thinking it was all about travel, and once we'd actually done the analysis, then it was very clear that it was all about consumables and resources and all the things in our supply chains, and not so much about our direct impacts through travel, which was interesting. We then did a massive, or not we, the States Department did a massive consultation with the whole university about what kinds of things might be more or less acceptable. Like, would you like to have the default vegetarian diet, which is very controversial. Actually, we don't, we just have guidelines. Would you like to have a travel policy? We introduced a travel levy so that anyone who books a flight on university business has to pay a levy into the sustainability fund. And it continues to be very, very consultative. So I think I was so proud to be part of this. It was very much led out of our teams. People like Rosalind actually led it. And I think that's great, because academics can be in support. We can do some of the technical work, but we shouldn't be the ones leading it. It needs to come from the people in the university who can make the change in procurement, for example.
Great. And in terms of becoming nature positive, is Oxford nature positive now? Or if not, when will it become nature positive?
Well, that's a good question. No. And so we've made a commitment to be nature positive by 2035, and that includes not just our direct impacts, but our supply chains as well. Our analyses showed that even if we implemented everything in our strategy, we'd be only, a third to two-thirds of the way towards that, depending on how rigorous we are. There's a huge amount of impact that you just can't mitigate while still being a university. We have to have campuses, we have to have electricity, we have to have food, we use water. So the question which we are still grappling with is, having tried to reduce our impacts as much as we can, what is that next step? What can we do to actually offset our impact while we have the systemic transformation that the whole of society needs? So, of course, one of the things we can do is actually contribute to the societal systemic transition that we need through our education, through explaining to students through the curriculum what needs to be done, through talking to policymakers, whether that be at the city level, as you say, Sam, or whether it be at the national level. If we can band together and plot a path towards societal change, that is a big contribution that will help us all to be able to have cleaner, greener supply chains. Because at the moment, it's incredibly hard as a university or as any institution to actually make the big difference. We can all do things on our campus, and we should, and that's important. But the big difference in the supply chains is a whole of society, whole of planet issue, which we can work towards.
Right. Okay, so thanks, EJ. So it sounds like it's a process. It takes time, but with the university on board, you can do it. There are a lot of surprises out there. It's not always in flights. It's in other areas, and it's also around working out, once you've baselined the impact that your university is having on nature, work out how you can make the greatest difference in the place that's causing the greatest harm. So that seems like a good top tip. Now, Henry, I'm just going to look to you again, see if Martin Schleipfer from the University of Geneva is on the call. I'm
I
assuming.
think Rosalind wanted to come in to answer that question.
Sorry, Ros, jump in.
Yeah, I just wanted to add the EJ story, a slightly different route that happened at the University of Exeter, because while we're really lucky that at the moment we have a really high level support for becoming nature positive, that was actually originally driven from a very sort of grassroots process. So the University of Exeter declared an environment and climate emergency back in 2019, and that was actually in response to campaigning by staff and students at the university. So it started from sort of a bottom-up level, and since that we've been lucky to have more of the senior level support come in. But I just wanted to flag that we didn't necessarily start from that position of having the money guy driving the change. We started from a sort of grassroots level as well.
Yeah, I think change can come from bottom up and top down, as Favour attested to as well. Mohammed, I'm going to just give you the chance just to come in with a quick contribution, if you don't mind, so I don't forget you as we go forward. So Mohammed, over to you briefly.
Right, thank you very much. My name is Mohammed Falaki from Ahmadu Bello University in Nigeria. I'm grateful to be here, and this is quite interesting. And the question I have, it's a build-up to what Favour contributed earlier. I'm just curious, how can students participate in setting a biodiversity baseline for university land and plantation, especially for large universities that actually cover thousands of hectares of land, with so many activities, with students from in different parts of the campus, with so many activities going on, and individually students can decide to want to participate individually, but in such settings, from my experience, it makes more impact if they actually approach this as a group.
Yeah,
and
great question.
I found what Professor EJ mentioned earlier about how the universities can actually make an impact by looking into research and teaching, things like curriculum and things like that. That's really quite interesting. If that can actually be done, because many times you find universities going out of the campus to get case studies and areas to work with students, when there are a lot of interesting activities on campus to actually work on with the students rather than looking elsewhere. So yeah. I'm just really kind of curious, how can students participate in setting a biodiversity baseline, especially different universities having different settings and what have you.
That's great.
Yeah.
Professor Falaki, thank you for making that question. So I'm not quite sure who has the best answer to that question. So I'm just going to see who would like to take that on. Favour, you were mentioned, which doesn't honour bound you to reply, but maybe it does. So do you want to take that one on?
Okay, yes, thank you very much. Thank you so much, Professor Mohammed, for asking that question. I think I will answer it from the Nigerian perspective. I think there's a gap between staff and students' relationship working together. There is this gap in the synergy to work together on this kind of actions. So I think that's the uniqueness of the Nature Positive Universities initiative. We are bringing together staff and students, which means Nature Positive Universities initiative, we cannot directly reach all the students, but universities can reach all the students. So it comes from the university's activities. For example, if the university has an activity, take for example, World Environment Day, it is easier for the university to reach out to students through social media, through emails, just making this publicity. That's because there are a lot of students who are interested in this initiative, but as students will also say, my university is not so keen about these activities. They don't carry us along when they host these activities, so I am not participating. But if universities can work together and bring in students' participation, student opinion in the planning, in the design, in the implementation of this project, then we can get more students actually involved. Because I've actually seen it from my own university. I think in the last World Environment Day, as a young student who has an experience in planning this event, I was invited to actually put together an event to plan this event, and it brought in more students to participate because students want an inclusive space. They want a space that is accessible, that is inclusive, that actually shares and carry on their opinions, what they think, and how to also support them. So if universities' initiative, their action, their plan can actually drive more students, can be more inclusive, then trust me, you get lots and lots of students that will be willing to participate. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Favor. But I do think, I wonder, Emily, just as the coordinator of MPU, maybe there needs to be more guidance on how to do like a baselining of what is possible on the campus, and maybe on the tools around how you can kind of work out where the problems are so you can address those. Is there tools out there already, or are there tools coming? Just briefly.
Yes, yeah, we have got some guidance very nearly ready. Firstly, looking at, well, two sets of guidance. One about looking at the campus and how you would approach biodiversity baselines, whether you focus on a citizen science kind of approach using staff and students, but without necessarily being ecologists or having that expertise themselves, all the way up to if you do have resources to pay a consultant to come and do ecological surveys for you, and various things in between. I think there's lots of different ways you can approach it, lots of different tools. And the other bit of guidance that we are also just about to release is looking at the supply chain side. So what we call a biodiversity footprint that EJ talked about, really trying to get a measure of what your global overseas impacts on nature might be, as well as just the biodiversity you see.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Emily. Just checking, I didn't check very well last time. Anyone else want to come on this? Otherwise, I might move to another question. Nope.
I think Sugam has some experience that it might be useful to share.
Okay. Sugam, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, my name is Shugam Guragai, and I am currently studying in Agriculture and Forestry University, Nepal. When it comes to organizing program, I have initially faced various challenges such as lack of researches and funding and expertise. Despite these challenges, I have managed to conduct several successful programs. I organize a bird orientation and identification program on university premises. For this, I gathered bird lovers of our university and had a walk along the bird watching session on the transit survey method. Then the orientation session was held for further exchanging of the information and for the data analysis only for the learning purposes. Additionally, I conducted a water hole management and cleanliness program to benefit animals and birds. I also celebrated Total Day with various activities, including a rally, community awareness initiative, and educational stall aimed at public. Today morning, I completed a school awareness program at 4 different schools focusing on climate change and the role of forest and tree in mitigating its effect. I worked on this for past 3 days to conduct a program in each school. Thank you.
There we go. I've done that once. So I think, Shugam, there's a lot of really good examples of the kind of things you've been doing in Nepal that I think others would benefit from. I think that is a case study on the website, and if it's not, I think it definitely should be. But thank you for all you do, Shugam, and all you're about to do. Henry, we've had a couple of other questions come in from other people. I'm just wondering if you want to maybe read one out for the panel.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. So we had a question come in from Martin Schleifer, who I don't think is able to join us at the moment, from the University of Geneva, who asks, so they say, given the alignment of actions that reduce carbon greenhouse gas emissions and reducing biodiversity footprint, why is it worthwhile pursuing nature positive actions? Why not just stick with trying to reduce footprint and reduce greenhouse gases? Why go the extra step and pursue nature positive actions?
Hey, good question from Martin. I'm looking at EJ and I'm looking at Roz. So EJ, I'm going to come to you.
We did have that question raised quite a lot in our university when we were talking about going nature positive. And I think managed to convince them that we needed a twin target of both greenhouse gas and biodiversity, and they should be at an equal level. I do still have to, in most meetings, say, and biodiversity, as people start talking about climate change. But I think it's really important to understand that although biodiversity loss and climate change are very much linked, because climate change is a threat to biodiversity, on the other hand, biodiversity maintenance can actually help us to adapt to and mitigate climate change. So healthy biodiversity, healthy nature means better climate. But I think it's also important to separate them, because the drivers of biodiversity loss are not just climate change. So land use change, land clearance, pollution, and invasive species and overexploitation are the big current drivers of biodiversity loss. So if we want to have resilient ecosystems that are capable of helping us to resist climate change and support all the species that we love, then we have to think separately about biodiversity and climate, as well as about the positive and negative interactions between them.
Great, thanks, EJ. So it sounds like just nature and climate are two sides of the same coin, and you need one to support the other. You can't just focus on one problem. You have to focus on the two together. But it feels like working on nature is a much newer area, and it's a bit less well understood. And so just maybe a question for you, Roz, if I can put it to you, which is, at the University of Exeter, what kind of support have you had to push things on, or what kind of barriers have you faced? And have you got any tips or tricks when people are using the no word, how you deal with that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think similar to EJ's experience, there has been quite a big focus on climate, and I think there is increased awareness and understanding that being nature positive is different. In terms of barriers, I think in some ways the term nature positive has been quite beneficial, because it speaks to a lot of people who historically have found terms like biodiversity net gain a little bit challenging to sort of understand. So maybe we can reach a slightly different audience by using that phrase. I've found going to people where they are is actually really sort of quite important. So certainly with some sectors of the university, you might be a bit less engaged. Going to their team meetings and getting in front of them and being like, we're here, this is what we're doing, this is why it's this is why it could be important to you, I think has been a way to much better sort of engage with people and to try and break down some of those barriers. And I think quite often you find champions in slightly unexpected places. So within sectors and teams who traditionally might not necessarily be interested in being nature positive, I think quite often you'll find someone who has an interest in being nature positive, whether that comes from sort of gardening, or they're something they're interested in outside work. Then it's really helpful to find those people who are sort of a way into maybe some areas that you don't have. And I think the other thing that's nice about being nature positive is coming with things that you can do. So you're not just saying, well, you can't do that, is to say, well, this is what you can do, and this is how it might benefit. And maybe we put in a bit of extra work now, but it might be useful for some other thing in the future, and how it might actually improve what you do.
Right. I think I'm going to pronounce this hopefully correctly, but Igwabuki from, I think you're from Nigeria. Did you want to come in with a question? I can see your hand raised, sir.
Hello.
I think we might want to try that one more time.
Can you hear me?
There's a bit of an echo, but let's try. Go ahead.
I have to put off my video to be able to. Okay. Can you hear me now?
We can, but Henry, do you think this is okay or not? You're my guide on this.
Let's try it and see how it goes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
I'm going to say this isn't working. We're getting a terrible ring. So what we might need to do is just get you to clean up the audio. Then I'll come back to you in, say, 5 minutes for your contribution, if that's okay. Just because we're hearing something somewhere else. If you could just kind of play with the cable somewhere, then we'll bring you back on. So don't worry, we'll come back. But I might just turn to another question if that's okay.
That's fine.
Okay, so I was going to see, we've got some really good questions that have come in advance of this call. I was going to ask around the role of government, just around thinking around agricultural subsidies or how either local government or national government could be supporting universities to take action on this. Is that to be welcomed? Is it happening? How could governments help universities be more nature positive? Any good ideas on that? Because that could always help universities go further faster. I'm wondering, EJ, if that's one for you or one for Emily, but somebody take the floor.
Well, I guess, like I said, we are, as universities, trusted advisors to government. We can be. And I think one of the important things is to make sure that your academics are actually going out there and talking properly to policymakers, because often the temptation is just to write a paper saying what you think and put it in a journal and hope that the government reads it. And I can tell you they won't. And so actually joining scientific committees, if there's such a thing in your country, you know, that advisory committees to your government can be helpful. I also think that people could join things like the Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, IPBES, which is something that welcomes scientists from around the world to provide advice into intergovernmental processes, could be really helpful. So I think there's a number of different ways in which we can get involved to make sure that our research, our science actually is seen by the right people and that we use our role as advisors. And I wonder if Henry might say something, because he was at the Convention on Biological Diversity as a student, which was quite interesting.
DJ, yeah, I attended COP15 in Montreal, and it was a fascinating experience as a student, because from the student perspective, this whole world of the CBD and how COP works feels a world away, and it's just not something that students interact with. So how do you make that relevant back to student action is a really difficult one. What I learned, I mean, I don't claim to be an expert, but what I learned, if anything, was that actually there is scope for small actions to contribute towards it. And I don't think that there should be this idea that you need to do something big, or a student needs to do something, you know, that has huge impact for it to make a difference. Because if every student sort of does something small, then that in its turn, you know, has a cumulative impact. Where that relates back to the CBD is understanding where the sort of priorities of the CBD are, and that's for organizations like NPU to really communicate much more clearly. How do we translate what the big headlines of the CBD are? How do they translate into the small actions that students can undertake? Individual students, of course, can have huge impacts and do really big and impressive things, and I don't want to discourage any of that. But for the average student who, you know, is trying to undertake smaller actions, the role of something like NPU can be to translate how do we turn big things like the CBD, important things like COP, into the small actions that individual students can do, even if they only do something for the 2 or 3 years they're at university, and before moving on, what are the small things that they can do? That's what I took away there, is the small actions can be really important when you join them all together.
Right. Yeah, I think just looking at some of these, I don't know if they're with us on the call, but Abbas Khan, who's done an amazing amount of work in Lahore around restoration activities. We've got Sanusi Hayatu from Nigeria, who's planning a whole intercampus campaign against deforestation as well. I really think blending students with the university kind of staff to work together as a cohort is how really powerful change can happen. So I think having students being front and center on this makes a hell of a difference. And I just wondered, Emily, if there are a couple of other students that you think deserve to be kind of spotlighted, if that's such a good use of grammar, always careful with people from Oxford, to see if there's others that you think really deserve being kind of put on a pedestal and clapped.
And we do have a couple of students on the call now. I don't know if they'd like to say a word, if they're in a position to. We have Cella Rossi from a UK university who might like to say a few words. And we also have Avery Marin from Laurentian in Canada. So if either of you are able to unmute and say a few words about your actions, we'd love to hear from you. Perhaps they're not in a position to, but I know that Cella has been looking in the southwest of England. She's been looking at a student sort of campaign to try and increase rewilding on university land. And so she's conducted personally, in a student capacity, a large survey across staff and students to sort of gather opinions and motivations for having more of their university land left to nature. And so she's done that sort of quite comprehensive work, gathering opinions really to try and build consensus and to try and understand what people think and what they would be prepared to do. And then she's sort of acted as an intermediary within her university staff to put that case across to try and think about how land could be used differently. Avery at Laurentian University in Canada has spearheaded a sort of PIN pledge that they've got. Graduating students have taken a pledge as they graduate to make commitments for nature ongoing in their future working life after leaving the university. I think that can be a small and sort of simple but really powerful step to a sort of legacy of their university time taking action for nature, but to continue on into their time. And I think there's so many things students can do. Just stepping back to what you were just talking about and what Ros was talking about, I think talking in different languages. Ros talked about having to make the case, make the case to different people in different sort of forums. I think learning to talk in different languages is really important job of all of us. So you might need to talk about risk or reputation or legacy in some groupings with certain people in your sort of university management. Other times it might be student well-being or clean air or shade on campus, or talking about design and designing out waste and thinking of those sort of holistic systems that we need. So really just to say that I think we need all of the expertise on board. It's not really something just for biologists or ecologists, but we need supply chains experts and business experts and social scientists and behavior experts and communicators. I think there's a job for all of us.
Right. Okay. I think this is a real team effort. It's not one person can lead this like some kind of Goliath that can drag this whole thing up a hill. You can't. You need a whole team to work with you to be successful. And I think students, I would say this, I think they're real treasure in this work. So what you said, Professor Falaki, around the role of students, just working with them to kind of tap to be supportive on this, they can learn by doing. I think there's a really big part of that. Now, sir, Igwebuki, how are we doing with your line? I'm going to hand over to you and I'm going to cross my fingers, but I'm sure it's fixed.
Yes, it's fixed. Thank you very, very much. Yeah, thank you, Sam. I'm really happy to be part of this. I'm also happy to see Emily. I was in touch with her like 2 years ago at a point where so let me introduce myself. I'm Igwebuki Ijoma. I sit on the board of climate strategies in the UK, and Climate Strategies is a global climate change governance think tank based in London. I'm also the Nigeria country representative for the World Council for Renewable Energy. It's a global renewable energy advocacy organization based in Bonn in Germany. Back home here in Nigeria, I am an environpreneur and I run an advisory company, Shuriga Green Tech, which we use in helping national governments, subnational governments, and universities and businesses to deal with the impacts of climate change, build their resilience, and as well as highlight opportunities which they can leverage, to enthrone sustainability in their businesses and in their operations. And 2 years ago, we came up with a program for universities, which we call the OIC program, because our consultancy works at the intersection of the three most important stakeholders in driving sustainable development elsewhere, but this is not happening in Africa. The academia, the business industry, and then the crown, the policymakers, the governments. Each of these work in silos, and because we work at the intersection, they hardly meet. We identify similar, very concrete, obvious problems that we now try to use our programs that we design to solve, fix, for instance, in the universities. So the issue we found with the universities here in Nigeria, and that's why I'm very happy to see Favor and Mohammed Falaki, is that's kind of, they are not interfacing enough with the industry. And that's the program we designed, the OIC program we designed was actually meant to get them to see what's happening, the trend in the industry, both nationally, regionally, and globally, and then see how they can leverage that as self-operating entities. Because what we have done is to, disaggregate the stakeholders, do a stakeholders mapping, and see that previously there are gaps in the approach. For instance, a lot of attention was being paid on the national government, right, as against subnational government. And then when we designed the program for subnational government, we now saw that universities are actually, some kind of microcosm of subnational governments, because they are, self-contained community that you can actually implement any program you want to implement there, and then create value. And I think it was a professor that talked about, the universities being trusted centers of growth, centers of knowledge, centers of innovation, right? So empowering the universities to be able to drive this agenda, right, is very, very important. And why it's really paining me that, I'm not happy that I missed the fellowship, the Leventis fellowship that Professor is managing, because we have really, we have identified programs that we can work with external change actors, like Oxford University and the Leventis programs to really drive change here. And I'll be happy to connect with Favor and Mohammed, to see how we can, advance this conversation. But there is always a gap, and that gap.
There is always a gap. I'm going to have to create a bit of a gap here as well, if you don't mind, just because time is no longer our friend. But it feels like we can do more with the private sector. Universities are often micro-states in and of themselves with 100,000 students there. Working with students, with universities to showcase what can be done is replicable in other locations, because the administrative civil service behind a university is probably mirrored in other parts of society as well. So I think that's a good point, well made. I wasn't sure, was there a question there? Because otherwise I think I've only got time for one more. But Igwebuike, I'm really glad the sound worked, and it's really good to have you on the call. I think Nathan might be with us from WWF. He and I have been talking around how can nature positive universities connect more into the global biodiversity framework, which has many goals on education, many goals on youth empowerment. And so, Nathan, over to you to maybe ask a question to wrap up.
Thank you, and I'm sorry that I couldn't join you guys for the whole call today. I was on another one. Yeah, I mean, I heard some things as I was coming on here from EJ, and I think that sounds really positive. But again, it's this idea of what kind of a journey can we create for students to become active. And I mean, you know, Sam, we've talked a lot about the skill development, but I'm curious, like, to bring a young person. I mean, we said that the actions that they take can be very small to very complex, but in general, what can universities do to create the framework or the support needed for a young person to become active? You know, whether it's politically active, whether it's engaged in other ways. But I'm just curious, what are universities doing right now to create that frame? Is it skill building and beyond just the academic?
Okay. So what are universities currently doing? Maybe what more could they be doing? So who would like to take that for the panel? I might choose someone. Go for it, Ros.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And we sort of at the University of Exeter, we have a sort of number of ways to help students along that kind of journey from the there's students as change agents, which is a sort of project-based approach where students have an idea that they want to change, and then that's facilitated via the university. Also, I don't know how international like the structure of having a students' union is, but most UK universities have a students' union, and those are paid roles that students do as a sabbatical as part of their career, and that's very strongly supported by the university in terms of training. So that and members from the student union then sit on the university sort of boards and panels, so they're then involved in decision making at sort of high levels. So that's a sort of those are almost the more formal structures that we use. And I think we certainly put that into our developing nature positive strategy, that one of our actions was to empower people to make the changes that they want to make. So certainly through development of student societies as well. We have a framework for student societies, and they can be issue driven or not, and there's sort of structures and help around how students might set up a society. So that can be, we have a very active sustainability society called Be the Change. So those are the ways in which we try and sort of support people who have ideas and want to make change within their institution. But a selection of them.
Right. That sounds great, Ros. So the change agents link, I think Emily's just dropped into the chat, so we could take a look at that. And I think maybe the message, Nathan, is that are all universities doing this? Probably not. Are some? Yes. Is there more that could be done? For sure. And so I think the question is really the legacy of a university when it comes to sustainability is the choices that students go on to make for the next 70 years of their life. It's not just within the institutional setting, it's the tools, the skill sets, the mindsets that students go on to leave with the graduation process behind them, and how they take that into the workplace. So I think it's a good question, but I'm sure there's more to be done. Henry's reminding me that we should start to wrap up, I think. So with that in mind, I just wondered if we could ask each member of the panel, so EJ, Favor, Emily, and Ros, just to say maybe a couple of sentences on, for those listening in, either on the recording on the call, what is your one piece of wisdom on NPU you want to share? And I might start with Emily first, if that's okay.
Yeah, I guess I would just like to celebrate the local knowledge that your universities have at every level. And so really going to the people that are doing the purchasing and listening to their expertise and understanding students and what they can offer and what they can do within their courses, listening to ground staff, to catering staff, architects, ecologists, you know, all of the people across the board, and just let's try and build a great network together and get started right away.
Great, thanks, Emily. And while we're going through this roundup, if there's anything else you think you're missing in the chat, if you could say, I would like a session on this, I'd like to know more about this. I think if there is more kind of questions and propositions from those listening in about what the gaps are, what you think we should be considering, that'd be really helpful. So that was just a public service announcement. And now I'll turn to EJ.
What I love about nature positive universities is that we are sharing and learning amongst ourselves. No single university has got this right yet. We're all on a journey together. And the more it is a journey together and the more that we learn from each other, the better. Because, you know, we are, as a sector, a bit special. I think we can have much more influence than other sectors through our students, through our influence, through our education, through our research, and also through our actions. So let's just keep talking and use the NPU as a way to get top tips and share experiences as we have today.
Right. Ros, last word from you. One little nugget of wisdom.
I suppose I would say, as best you can, try to bring everybody with you, and meet people where they're at. So yeah, maybe that's two. So meet people where they're at and then try and bring them with you.
Great, super. And meeting people where they're at, Favour, let's meet you where you're at. Send us off with one last piece of wisdom before Henry takes us off to the closing ceremony.
Okay, what I would say is there is a profound opportunity for everyone to work intersectionally and begin to restore nature. So while we are talking work and putting the effort and nature positive goals. Thank you.
Thanks, Favour. Mr. Grubb, I'm going to give you the baton just to tidy up the session. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. And thank you to our panelists. Henry, final words.
Thank you so much, Sam, for chairing that. And of course, thank you to Emily, EJ, Ros, and Favour for contributing to this panel. And thank you to everybody who's just spoken and asked a question. We do have some quick time for feedback. Please scan the QR code on the screen now to fill out our quick feedback survey, please. We'd love to have your feedback. And as Sam says, obviously put in the chat what you would like us to do next. Giving people a couple of moments to scan that QR code. Please do it now. And of course, if you are in Bologna, in Italy, as you can see, I clearly am, for the European Congress on Conservation Biology, then please come and let us know. Come and find myself and EJ. We are both here in Bologna for the week. So if you are one of the representatives of a university here in Bologna, please let us know. We hope you've been inspired to take the next step on your own nature positive journey. We're just about to put a link in the chat to our pledge form for universities and a link to watch all of the webinars from this series on YouTube. This is the final webinar for our current series. We will, of course, be back and taking your ideas on board about what to do next. Taking the pledge is the first step, so we really hope that some of you here today who are not yet pledged universities will be inspired to take your universities on that pledge journey and join us in making the world a more positive place for nature. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. I hope you have a fantastic day, and of course, we'll be in touch very soon for the next step in our nature positive journeys. Thank you, everybody, and goodbye.